During the first week of my retirement, my son looked me straight in the eye and said, "We don't need another mouth to feed in this house." He said it so casually, like he was talking about a broken appliance, not his own father. Then he added, "But don't worry, Dad, I found you a job." A job. At 65. After 40 years of waking up at dawn, working double shifts, and giving every ounce of myself to raise him, my son found me a job. I smiled. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that revenge tastes best when it's served with a calm smile. That night, as we sat at the dinner table, I announced my retirement with genuine pride. 40 years at the plant, son. I'm finally done. It's time to rest. My daughter-in-law, Megan, set down her glass and gave me a sharp look. Rest? That's nice, but I hope you're not planning to just sit around here. I laughed softly, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. My son Mark cleared his throat. Dad, things are tight right now. You can't expect us to cover your expenses too. You'll need to keep working. Maybe something simple. Expenses. I had paid for his college, his wedding, even the down payment on this very house. And now I was an expense. I looked at them both, my only family, and something in me cracked. You've been living here rent-free for years, Megan said, cutting her steak with surgical precision. You can at least contribute. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said. I'll find something. She smiled, satisfied. Mark leaned back, relieved. They thought they'd broken me, but they'd only woken something I'd buried long ago. That night, through the thin walls of my small guest room, I heard them whispering. Think he'll actually get a job? Megan asked. Mark laughed. He'll have to. I already talked to the owner at that diner downtown. They'll take him on as a cleaner. Minimum wage. They both chuckled. Perfect, she said. Maybe this'll teach him some humility. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Humility. That's what they thought I needed. The next morning I packed my old briefcase not for cleaning supplies, but for something much more dangerous, documentation. I still had access to my old files, the ones that proved exactly how much I'd built over the decades. The pension, the hidden savings, the stocks, and something else. Something my son didn't even know existed. You see, 20 years ago, I had quietly invested in a small construction firm that grew into a multi-million-dollar company. I'd remained a silent partner, never flaunting the money, never bragging. I'd wanted Mark to grow up with humility, the very thing he accused me of lacking. I sat by the window, watching the sun rise. He thought I was broke. He thought I was desperate. He thought he could humiliate me into submission. So, I smiled to myself and whispered, All right, son, let's play your little game. By the end of the week, he'd learn exactly who I really was and why underestimating your father is the most expensive mistake a man can make. The next morning, over breakfast, I played the role of the obedient old man perfectly. Mark, I said, I appreciate what you did for me. I'll start at the diner tomorrow. He grinned, satisfied. Good to hear, Dad. Just don't embarrass me, all right? Do your job, stay quiet, and be grateful. I sipped my coffee and nodded. Grateful, I repeated softly. In my mind, though, I was already picturing the look on his face when he discovered that the man scrubbing tables at the diner owned the very company that held his mortgage. But I wasn't in a rush. Revenge, after all, is an art form, and I'd just begun sketching the outline. I left the house before sunrise and walked to the diner my son had chosen for me, the one with the flickering neon sign that reads Rosas in cherry red. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon hugged the booths like an old memory. A woman with gray streaks in her braid looked up from the register and froze. Douglas Cook, she whispered, stepping out from behind the counter. It is you. Morning, Rosa, I said, smiling. I hear you're taking on a new cleaner. Her laugh broke into a disbelieving grin. Cleaner? Douglas? You wrote the first check that let me buy this building. You told me, make it beautiful and make it yours. She shook her head. Who stuck you with a mop? My son, I answered. And I need a favor. Play along. Rosa didn't ask why. She poured coffee, slid a blueberry muffin across the counter, and nodded. I'll hire you for Tuesday training at 6. Meanwhile, you can use my office. In that tiny office, I made 3 calls. First, to Carla Wynn, branch manager at Cascade Bank. 20 years ago, she was my teller, a kid I'd coached through night classes. Carla, I said, if anyone tries to move funds for my pension or add themselves to my accounts, I want an alert to me and to you, in person. Of course, Mr. Cook, she said softly. Is someone pressuring you? Just a test, I replied, for both of us. Second call, to my attorney, Herrera. We reactivated a durable power of attorney mine with a twist. Any changes to my property would trigger an automatic injunction. Third call, to a man my son worships from afar. Harlan speaking. Evan, I said, it's Douglas. Lunch tomorrow, and do invite the bright young manager who keeps emailing you about a strategic operations promotion. Name's Mark Cook. Harlan chuckled. Your boy? He's persistent. Noon at the Foundry Club? Perfect. By dinner, I'd returned home with a grocery bag and a useless smile. Megan was already plating roasted chicken. She barely looked at me. Mark cleared his throat, like a judge about to pass sentence. Dad, Tuesday, 6 a.m. Don't embarrass me. I'll be there, I said, cutting my chicken, grateful. That night, the walls grew thin again. I heard paper shuffle, then Megan's voice, low and precise. He signs these Saturday at the bank. Power of attorney. We'll say it's for medical emergencies. Once his pension hits our account, we shift the deed. Assisted living, by fall. Mark exhaled. He'll never sign if he reads it. He won't, she said. He trusts you. My jaw tightened. I texted Carla a single line. They'll come Saturday. Have the private room ready. She replied with a thumbs up and a lock emoji. Tuesday morning, I did not report to Rosa's. I sat on the porch with coffee, listening to the wind comb the maple leaves. At 6:27, my phone exploded. Where are you? Mark hissed. Rosa called me. You're making me look like a fool. I'll make it up to you, I said mildly. Lunch today. The Foundry Club. Noon. With who? Someone who might change your life, I answered, letting the silence stretch. Wear your best suit, son. At 11:45 a.m., I sat at a window table in the Foundry Club, one of Portland's most exclusive business lounges, the kind of place my son dreamed of but had never been invited to. I'd been a founding member back when this was nothing but an abandoned steel mill and a vision on paper. Mark arrived 15 minutes late, sweating through his navy suit. He looked around like a kid sneaking into a palace. Dad, what is this place? Who are we meeting? You'll see, I said, sipping my tea calmly. A tall man in a charcoal suit approached, silver hair, gold cufflinks, and the calm authority of someone used to making decisions that change lives. My son froze. Mr. Harland? He stammered. I've been trying to schedule a meeting with you for months. Evan Harland smiled thinly and shook my hand. Douglas, good to see you again. I was surprised when you called. You said you wanted to introduce me to someone? I gestured toward my son. Evan, this is Mark Cook. He's been very eager to work with your firm. Mark's face lit up. Yes, sir. I've been following Harlan Capital for years. It's an honor to finally meet you. Evan sat, studying him. So you're Douglas's boy. You know, your father was one of the first private investors in my firm. Without him, we wouldn't have survived the 2008 crash. Mark blinked. Wait, you mean my father? Yes, Evan interrupted smoothly. Your father owns 18% of Harlan Capital. Has for years. Mark's mouth opened, then closed again. I didn't know that. Evan's voice cooled. Most people don't. He doesn't advertise it. He's old-fashioned, believes money should stay quiet until it needs to speak. I smiled faintly, watching my son struggle to hide the shock twisting his face. He looked at me differently now, less like a burden, more like a puzzle he'd never solved. Evan turned to me. "Douglas, we still have that open seat on the advisory board. Would you consider returning? It would be good to have your mind on the table again." I pretended to think. "Possibly. I'll have more time now that I'm retired, though my son's keeping me busy." Evan chuckled politely. "You raised a confident one." "Confident," I repeated. "Yes, that's one word for it." We ate in relative silence after that. Mark barely touched his food, his thoughts spinning behind his nervous eyes. I knew exactly what he was thinking all those nights he'd called me lazy, dependent, washed up. When lunch ended, Evan shook my hand and said, "Good seeing you, Douglas. I'll send the new contracts next week." Then he looked at Mark. "And good luck to you, son. If you're even half the man your father is, you'll do fine." Mark stood there frozen as Evan walked away. When we were alone, he finally found his voice. "Dad, what was that? You own part of Harland Capital? Why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at him calmly. "Because I wanted you to understand what respect looks like before you understood what wealth does." He swallowed hard, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't mean..." But I raised a hand, stopping him. "It's fine, Mark. You said I needed a job, and you were right. We all need purpose. Mine just happens to be a little bigger than you imagined." He nodded silently, unsure of what to say. Then, like a man trying to regain control of a collapsing meeting, he straightened his tie. "Listen, Dad, about the documents Megan wanted you to sign this weekend. It's just legal stuff. Nothing serious." "Of course," I said softly. "I'll be sure to read them carefully." As we walked out, I clapped him on the shoulder. "By the way, son, I may need your help tomorrow morning. Something important. At your office." "My office?" He frowned. "Why?" I smiled. "Let's just call it a learning opportunity." By the time we got home, Megan was waiting with wine glasses on the counter, pretending not to be curious. Mark walked past her like a ghost, muttering something about board seats and investments. I poured myself a drink, looked at my reflection in the kitchen window, and whispered, "Tomorrow, son. Tomorrow you'll see exactly what kind of job your father really does." The next morning, the house felt tense, like the air itself knew something was about to break. Mark barely spoke during breakfast. Megan, on the other hand, tried to keep her usual sharpness. "Don't forget the papers for Saturday, Doug," she said, setting her coffee down. "It's important you sign before the weekend." I nodded, smiling faintly. Don't worry, I wouldn't miss it for the world. At 8:30 a.m., I stood at the front door holding an envelope. "Mark," I said, "I need a ride downtown. I want to drop something off at your office." He frowned, suspicious, but still eager to redeem himself. "Fine, but make it quick." The ride was silent. I watched him grip the steering wheel, his jaw tight, knuckles pale. His pride was still bleeding from yesterday's lunch. He hadn't looked me in the eye since Evan's revelation. When we pulled into the lot of his company, he exhaled deeply. "All right, Dad. What's this about?" "You'll see," I said, stepping out and walking toward the entrance. Inside, the receptionist smiled warmly at me. "Good morning, Mr. Cook. Mr. Williams is expecting you." Mark's head snapped toward me. "Wait, what? Mr. Williams? The CEO?" I nodded calmly and followed the receptionist down the hall. She opened the glass door to the executive suite, and there he was, Mr. Williams himself, a tall, clean-cut man in a navy suit. He stood up immediately. "Douglas, a pleasure as always. We received your investment proposal. Impressive work. Come in." Mark froze mid-step. "Investment? Proposal?" "Yes," Williams said with a polite smile. "Your father is considering acquiring a controlling stake in our company. We've been negotiating for weeks. I must say, his terms are persuasive." Mark blinked like he'd been punched. "Acquiring what?" I turned to him slowly. "That's right, son. I'm buying 40% of your company. I wanted to understand your world before making a move. That's why I asked you to bring me here." The color drained from his face. You're buying my employer? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Correction, I already did. The transfer completed this morning. Silence fell like a blade. Williams cleared his throat awkwardly. Mark, we'll discuss your position later. For now, I'll let you and your father talk. When the door closed behind him, Mark finally broke. Dad, why? Why would you do this? Because I wanted you to understand humility, I said. You thought I was a burden, a mouth to feed. You laughed while your wife planned to steal my pension. You found me a janitor's job, thinking you were saving me. His voice cracked. I didn't mean... But you did, I interrupted, my tone soft but firm. You meant every word, and now you'll learn the same lesson I taught myself years ago. Power isn't money, Mark. It's character, and you've got none left. He slumped into the chair, eyes wet, hands shaking. What happens now? I looked out the window at the city skyline, the morning sun painting the glass towers gold. You'll keep your job, I said finally, but you'll start earning it. No shortcuts, no arrogance. From now on, every report you send crosses my desk. He swallowed hard, nodding like a child who'd just been scolded by life itself. As I turned to leave, Megan's name flashed on his phone screen. Incoming call. He ignored it. Outside, the wind felt cleaner, freer. For the first time in months, I breathed deeply and smiled. At the curb, I stopped and said quietly to myself, he wanted me to feed myself, and now, I own the table he eats from. I slipped my hands into my coat pockets and walked away, my reflection flickering across the office windows, not as a burden or a retiree, but as the man who never stopped building, never stopped thinking, and never once forgot who he was. Justice didn't need anger, it just needed patience. And I had waited long enough.